because I love you, because I love you, because I love you,
Wow.
because I love you,
The what?
because I love you, because I
want to sing you songs.
because I love you, because I
will always love you.
because I love you, because I love you, because I love you, because I love you.
I will take care of you.
Thank you. I call upon the Mayor of the City of eThekwini, Councillor James Numalo.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Minister of Economic Development, Honorable Ibrahim Patel, our Premier of the Province of KwaZulu-Natal, Honorable Senzo Mkono Macingwane, former Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa, Justice Sandile Ngobo Mapoloba, Judge President of the Competition Appeal Court of South Africa, Justice Dennis Davis, Deputy Minister of Economic Development, Honorable Madala Masugu, Member of the Executive Council of KwaZulu-Natal, MEC for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs, Honorable Michael Babuyakulu Ndiema, the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Economic Development of the National Assembly of South Africa, Honorable Coleman, Deputy Ministers and Members of Parliament and members of the legislatures present, Commissioner Bonagele and Deputy Commissioner, and all the commissioners present, tribunal members and heads of delegations from Brics competition agencies, delegates and officials from Brics member countries, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Sani Bonani, and the protocol is observed. Welcome to our beautiful city of Durban, eThekwini Municipality. On behalf of the good people of our city, I wish to extend a special welcome to all our international friends and delegates. And we are honored to be given the opportunity to host the 4th Brics International Competition Conference. Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, this conference provides a forum for the exchange of views on issues of common interest amongst Brics member countries and exploration of these developing countries' perspective on competition policy and enforcement. Under the theme, I quote, competition and inclusive growth, close quote, Brics will explore strategies and means of achieving inclusive economic growth through competition enforcement, and among others, the conference aims to share best practices and experiences on competition enforcement within and among Brics countries. And I'm pleased to mention that South Africa and Africa as a whole had benefited from economic cooperation with Brics partners. And this, ladies and gentlemen, was revealed by our President Jacob Zuma, who was speaking at the 7th Brics Summit held in Russia in July this year, 2015. Our President said there had been a 70% increase in South Africa's total trade with Brics, and in 2014, its total trade with Brics was 328 billion rands, from 268 billion rands in 2011. And Africa had doubled its total trade with Brics since 2007 to $340 billion, which is 4.2 trillion in 2012. And this was projected to reach 500 billion rand this year in 2015. Also through Brics, there are several sectors that are key areas of cooperation between our country and other countries, namely food production, power generation, petrochemical industry, mining, tourism, renewable and nuclear energy, trade, transportation, communication, and training. And prior to this, South Africa's entry into Brics grouping, the country's export trade with Brics countries stood at just 6.2% of a total export, a tiny percentage of our overall export activity. But when South Africa took up its seat as the 5th member of Brics in 2011, export grew to 16.8% and experiencing a growth of 29% by the end of the same year. An increase in international trade, improve efficiencies, economies of scale in production and foreign markets. Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, I'm of the view that this conference will deepen relations of the member states in the field of competition regulation and open economic opportunities. And lastly, let me take this opportunity to once again welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to our great seat of Durban, or eThekwini municipality, in our beautiful province of KwaZulu-Natal. And I wish you a successful conference, and I'm certain that we are all looking forward to the outcomes of this major conference. And I thank you very much, Program Director. Ngiyabule.
Minister of Economic Development and keynote speaker, Honorable Ibrahim Patel, Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Honorable Senzo Mchunu, Executive Mayor of eThekwini Municipality, Councillor James Nxumalo, former Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa, Justice Sandile Ngcobo, Judge President of the Competition Appeal Court of South Africa, Judge Dennis Davis, Deputy Minister of Economic Development, Honorable Madala Masuku, Member of the Executive Council of KwaZulu-Natal for Economic Development and Tourism and Environmental Affairs, Honorable Michael Mabuya Kulu, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Economic Development of the National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa, and legislatures present, Vice Ministers, Commissioners, and Tribunal members and heads of delegations from Brics competition agencies, delegates and officials from Brics member countries, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to also acknowledge in our presence today Professor Joseph Stiglitz, who is the Nobel Prize winner for economics. I also wish to acknowledge the presence of some multilateral institutions such as the OECD and the World Bank representatives. I'd like to join the mayor of the city in welcoming all of you into the beautiful city of Durban. Some of us have already enjoyed the hospitality of this city since we were here at the beginning of the week, and many of you are yet to experience that. I would also like to especially welcome our distinguished speakers, panel chairs, colleagues, and distinguished guests from all over the world. We are delighted to have all of you here. This conference has attracted over 500 delegates and participants from different parts of the world, with a very strong representation from Brics countries, competition authorities, as well as people coming from non-governmental organizations. We also have a very strong representation from our sister countries, from the rest of the African continent. Assembled here during this week is the biggest and most diverse thought leaders in competition law we have hosted in the African continent. It is clear that the Brics Competition Conference, held every 2 years by rotation amongst the Brics countries, is fast becoming an important date in the global antitrust calendar. The previous conferences held in Russia in 2009, China in 2011, and India in 2013 laid a very solid foundation for this conference. I should mention that we got the honor to host this conference on the request of our colleagues from Brazil, who asked that we should go before them. I think they wanted to save the best for last, but I don't envy them. The record will be very hard to beat. All the previous hosts have raised the bar too high. Nevertheless, I wish them good luck. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm aware that the Honorable Premier will not be joining us for the cultural dinner this evening, but I'm very glad that he was able to be here despite his busy schedule. For that reason, let me digress for a moment and thank the Premier for the hospitality we have received from the province and for the support from his office, that of the office of MEC Mabuya Kulu, as well as the city of Durban. We really do appreciate. Last evening, we were at Ushaka Marine for the reception, and I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody when I say we were all blown away to see all the sea creatures in their own territory and ourselves safe in our own territory. I should say, Premier, that everybody we met since we started organizing this conference was speaking with one voice. People were asking us, what is it that we needed to be a successful host? And for that, we really thank you. Minister Patel, we have already had 2 days in Durban, which have been attended by many delegates as a prelude to this Brics conference. In our countries, there's an ancient game of stick fighting. This is a game where 2 boys, it can also be girls, but it's mainly boys, each carrying 2 sticks, fight each other. The one stick, usually shorter, is used for the attack, and the longer speech is used as a shield. Many tales have been told of this game, and everybody who played it was good at it. My grandfather played it, he was outstanding. President Mandela played it, he was brilliant. And President Zuma too played it, and he was excellent. After the game, the boys would get together to attend to each other's wounds. Those who inflicted the wounds attending to their erstwhile rivals. In this process, they would talk about how to improve each other's game going forward, with the successful ones telling the less successful ones how they could beat them in future. In that way, the game continuously improved. This is exactly what we've been doing here in the past few days. Mr. Minister, I remember no other forum where we have had such an insightful, calm, and thoughtful public debates about our competition system here in South Africa. There were also debates about what Brics means for competition policy and enforcement globally. And we also had lectures on various aspects of competition practice, which were organized with our partners, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as CRES. Ladies and gentlemen, in New Delhi 2 years ago, we placed 2 issues before the Brics conference. One was, how do we move Brics competition authorities beyond the biannual conference to give practical expression to our desire to deepen cooperation? We also called for more work to be done on understanding the link between competition law and inequality, poverty, and unemployment. I'm encouraged by the many initiatives that are being taken in answering both these questions. We have seen much more cooperation and meetings between Brics competition authorities, the production of a newsletter containing information about developments in our respective countries, and negotiations of an MOU which are at advanced stage, aimed at fostering and formalizing cooperation amongst ourselves, discussions to form working groups on various areas of common interest. We are also very advanced in establishing a Brics-focused research platform. We've also seen renewed focus in understanding of the link between competition policy and the socio-economic objectives of ending poverty and reducing inequality and unemployment. I know that the OECD is doing some work in this area, and the World Bank earlier this year held a competition conference on exactly these matters. It is clear, though, that a lot of work in this area still needs to be done. It is obvious why Brics countries would be the best place to improve our understanding of these matters. Although much progress has been done in the area of poverty reduction, Brics countries remain saddled with a disproportionate high numbers of the world's poor, with all the accompanying social ills. But Brics countries also represent the best possibility to make the world advance in these socio-economic areas. This is because of their size. If you cut or eliminate poverty in Brics countries, half the problem would have been resolved. It is for this reason that we are unable to talk of competition policy in Brics outside of this context. Brics represents an important voice for the developing countries in the global antitrust policy discourse. But Brics can only play this role by developing their own capacity for thought leadership in this area. The cases emanating from these jurisdictions are also strikingly similar. Perhaps this is not surprising, given they are not often talked about transition from closed economies. Yesterday we heard about the excessive pricing steel cases and chemical cases in Russia. All of us in Brics jurisdictions have issues with pharmaceutical patents that contribute to the high costs of healthcare. And not so long ago, in not so far from here, back in 2001, the chief executives and managing directors of the cement producers in South Africa met in an attempt to extend the life of the apartheid-sanctioned cartel. In an attempt to circumvent the provisions of the new provisions of the competition laws, they agreed to keep in place a cap in their market shares and agreed to divide their territories. We know that Brazil also uncovered a very similar cartel. It is therefore befitting that there should be a lot of cooperation amongst Brics countries. And I'm very delighted that we were able to agree with our Brics counterparts on the theme for this conference, namely competition and inclusive growth. We have many experiences as a country that we can share with you in this area, and we will perhaps do so during the sessions of the conference. But for now, let me wish you all fruitful deliberations and an enjoyable stay in Durban. Thank you. I also now have a task of calling the MEC Mabuya Kulu, who is responsible for economic development as well as tourism and environment in KwaZulu-Natal, to make his few remarks and introduce the Premier. Thank you very much. MEC, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Bonarelle. May I take this opportunity to say I think all distinguished guests have now been recognized. May I say all protocol observed. We wish to express our delight as the KwaZulu-Natal for being part of this 4th Brics International Competitions Conference, a platform that has been created by all the member countries of this global body to share ideas and information on how to create economies that encourage competition and foster shared growth. The emergence of the Brics economies in the world, which until recently was dominated by a few economic players, has not only changed the world's economic landscape, but has also altered the very architecture of the global economic power dynamics. The Brics economies have provided a counterbalance to the global economic narrative that ensured that the dominant economic players did not only enjoy unfettered global hegemony, but also set the agenda for everyone in the world. No longer do we speak of economies that were perpetually at the receiving end of economic developments that were crafted elsewhere, but we now speak of a powerful global body of developing countries which is actively changing the face of the global economy to ensure that our people are in charge of their destiny and they are not playing things of fate. The emergence of the Brics has ensured that there is an alternative global player that works as a collective to actively promote the economic interests of the developing world. Critically, ladies and gentlemen, and because of the understanding that our fate as a people are inextricably linked, the Brics economic bloc has ensured that we work together to harness our global strength so that we can, as a people, bring our collective influence to bear on the global economic stage. Today, the Brics economies have a combined population of almost 3 billion, which makes up approximately 43% of the world population. And the combined nominal gross domestic product of these countries is estimated at approximately 16.039 trillion US dollars, equivalent to approximately 20% of the gross world product, and their combined foreign reserves are estimated at 4 trillion US dollars. In this regard, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the Brics Competitions Conference is another tangible achievement that owes its direct genesis to the formation of the Brics economic bloc. Critically, it is yet another physical expression of what the Brics member countries are doing to share information and best practices on how to create economies that are founded on the ethos of encouraging competition for the benefit of all our people. As the province of KwaZulu-Natal, we're more than excited that we have chosen our province as the host for such an important gathering, which goes to the heart of what all of us can do together to encourage economic growth in an environment where there are minimum economic discussions. Program Director, the theme for this conference, which is competition and inclusive growth, is instructive because our view is that in order to create inclusive growth, we all need to ensure that our economies are not only dominated by a few players that collude with one another and dabble in uncompetitive practices, but that we open space for many entrepreneurs to emerge. The current global economic climate, characterized by a downside economic outlook, creates an environment of declining commodity prices, reduced capital flows to emerging markets, and therefore put pressure on their currencies, coupled with increasing financial market volatility. And this means that it cannot be business as usual, and all of us need to cooperate and work with one another. In this regard, competition authorities the world over are called to do work with a greater sense of vigilance and agility to eliminate anti-competitive practices in their economies. In an environment of economic slump, it is natural that those who are dominant players will work even harder to protect their market share, and at times they will be tempted to use other methods to protect their turf. We strongly believe that competition authorities, especially in the emerging economic countries, which are on the developmental trajectory, should act as a bulwark to ensure that the dominant economic players do not use their economic power to muscle out the small and emerging economic enterprises. Fostering competition in the global economy has taken on an added significance when one looks at the fact that many economies these days are dominated by small to medium-sized micro enterprises. Of course, these enterprises have now become the biggest employers because they hold the biggest propensity to absorb many would-be employees. As all of us are aware, because of our history, our competition legal regime in the country has been structured in a way that is part of this grand agenda of redressing the imbalances of our immediate past. In this regard, the need for government procurement to foster competition and economic transformation, including creating set-aside sectors for the poor, has been uppermost in our minds. We have also taken cognizance of the fact that we need to devise the pro-poor competition policies to enable choice, encourage innovation, and provide goods and services to the consumers at the lowest possible prices. Because of the nature of our economy, which was created to benefit the few and relegate our people to the margins, it has become critical that the barriers to entry are lower in all sectors. Our view is that we cannot have an inclusive growth when there are sectors of the economy which are the preserve for these few and are no-go areas for your small and medium-sized micro-enterprises as well as cooperatives. However, it is also important that as bodies entrusted with the task of implementing competition rules, we should do so in a pragmatic manner, fully aware of the obtaining global economic conditions. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, we must ensure that as we pursue economic justice and fair practices, we should not do so in a manner that renders our economies and our companies vulnerable to takeovers. Our competition authorities have a responsibility to be globally in outlook and local in practice. In any economy, competition serves as an inbuilt mechanism to encourage innovation, reduce barriers to entry, and consequently lower the prices for the benefit of the citizens. From Director, one of the biggest challenges facing our country is, of course, the triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. There is no doubt that anti-competitive behavior militates against government policy to deal with these challenges. As a provincial government, we're working hard to promote investments into the sectors of the economy that are capable of creating more jobs per each rand or dollar invested in the province. We also promote investments into sectors that add meaningful contribution to the gross value added or output on the province. Moreover, our target is higher greenfield investments as opposed to mergers and acquisitions. This means that our efforts are always to gear towards diluting monopolistic tendencies in the provincial economic space, which in turn raises the purchasing power of the populace of our province. We are confident that this conference will not just be a platform to share ideas, but this conference will also become a platform where the shared learning can then be taken into practical action. This will ensure that we create an alternative body of knowledge on how to tackle anti-competitive behavior in our economies in order to foster shared growth. For our economies, we need to consolidate their place in the global economic arena. We need to ensure that we work together to share information and best practices. As I conclude, Program Director, we should remind all of the delegates who have descended to this beautiful city of Durban and this beautiful province of KwaZulu-Natal that whilst you should focus on the work at hand, I want to take this opportunity as the Provincial Minister for the Tourism in the province to say to you, we have the best malls that this country has ever had. And I would encourage you to spend all of your dollars, your euros, and whatever currencies, convert them into rands and spend them. We will look after them. We are very capable of doing so. We also want to encourage you to enjoy what this province has to offer. Indeed, I'm aware that there will be posters organized for some of you. And I was saying earlier, both to the minister, the premier, and I'm glad that there are vice ministers that are here from other Brics member countries. Indeed, we do have, not so far from where we are, a very important special place called Alwal Shoal. We will begin to introduce you to swim with the sharks, and we will not put you in a cage. And I'm sure you will enjoy that experience. But also, not so far from here, we also have got the Hluhluwe Mfolozi Game Park. It has the Big Five. We will also enjoy you to be able to take you to have a very rare experience to ride at the back of one of the well-trained lions so that you can have an experience of riding at the back of a lion. That should be a rare experience indeed. So as I then end, I end on a note that we are a country, a province that would like to just not to welcome you to do business here, but that want to give you leisure as well. Let me then take my responsibility to introduce the first citizen of this province. That is our premier. Our premier is an activist. He's someone who has grown among the ranks of the poor. He has played his part in fighting the system of apartheid in this country. He is a proud member of the ruling party in this country, the African National Congress, shortly known as the ANC. He has been playing in all of the senior positions in the African National Congress. He has been the provincial secretary, and he has just been the chairperson of the ANC in this province. He is the former MEC, provincial minister for education in our province. He is now the premier of this province, meaning he is the head of government in KwaZulu-Natal. I wish to introduce to you, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Edward Senzo Mchunu. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director, who has since disappeared and has put the conference proceedings on cruise. The Minister of Economic Development, Honorable Ibrahim Patel, who are glad to host this particular morning. The MSc for Economic Development, Tourism, and Environmental Affairs in the Provincial Government of KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Mike Mabiakulu, the former Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa, Justice Sandile Mapolova, Judge President of the Competition Appeal Court of South Africa, Justice Dennis Davis, and the Deputy Minister of Economic Development in the Republic, Honorable Mr. Madala Masugu, the Mayor of eThekwini Municipality, Mayor James Nxumalo, the Commissioner of the Competition Commissions in South Africa, Mr. Temingosi Bonagele, and your Deputy, and all the distinguished guests in this particular important meeting. It is indeed our pleasure to welcome you all in this beautiful province of KwaZulu-Natal, which first and foremost is positioning itself as a gateway to the region and to the rest of the continent of Africa. As a province of KwaZulu-Natal, we have two strategic ports that are critical in facilitating trade, particularly the movement of goods to and from Southern Africa, namely Durban and the port of Richards Bay. It is from these strategic ports that from which we take our cue to serve and position ourselves in this country as a gateway to the continent and the rest of the world. The fourth Brics International Competition Conference comes at an opportune time when all our efforts are directed at unlocking untapped economic opportunities, particularly in the marine industry. These opportunities are largely in the service sector, driven on the main by offshore exploration of oil and gas, which will further unlock existing and potential new capacity in the services sector, especially the shipping, building and repairs, and of course maintenance. Advanced economies in the sector have shown that for it to thrive and achieve its full potential, assertiveness in competition policy is critical in facilitating broader participation. As BRIC partners, part of the issues that we need to explore in this conference is exactly how we craft competition arrangements that facilitate the sharing of technical expertise and, of course, deepen our intervention in an effective way in the area of competition policy and regulation. Such technical cooperation must look at, among other things, into the kind of architecture we put in place to facilitate substantive progress within our individual countries, to protect infant industries where such exist, without closing off opportunities for participating with another and partnering with another in a mutually beneficial way to all of us. In other words, we all have our individual development imperatives that we must pursue in accordance with our unique realities. In the same equation, we equally have a commitment to one another to work together to grow our collective economies through trade and investment. This is the balancing act that we all need to be mindful of, but one that we must not shy away from in terms of discussion. We must do so as an attempt to find answers in achieving equitable trade among ourselves, without sacrificing all that gives us competitive edge to build dynamic economies that are globally competitive, yet responding adequately to our unique challenges and needs. It is thus important that we have robust engagement that moves us towards convergence of competition policy at BRICS level. This should facilitate deeper economic cooperation among ourselves as BRICS partners, without each one of us losing required policy space to drive an economic agenda that addresses domestic socio-economic contexts. Ours as South Africa, and in particular the province of KwaZulu-Natal, is to ensure that this economy works for all of us. That is why we have adopted a resolution at the provincial cabinet level to use public procurement of goods and services as a driver for economic transformation. This means we have deliberately designated a percentage of products to procure from enterprises owned by by black people, especially women, youth, and the disabled. Once you do that, you open new challenges, of course, that fall directly within the space of competition regulation, because those whose share of the market would to a certain extent be affected may undermine such agenda through anti-competitive measures. As the global economy integrates more and more, we are seeing an increase in measures and in acquisitions among bigger companies, of course, in the manufacturing, retail services, agriculture, and mining and other sectors. This means we are poised for a smaller number of dominant players in respective sectors, thereby leading to potential monopoly by those dominant players. Whereas we must encourage the flow of investment, both domestic and foreign, however, we need to look at how much measures and acquisitions crowd our potential new entrants into those sectors that may not have similar muscle to compete with established giants that are a product of such processes of measures. And of course, this is a jigsaw puzzle and a very problematic one that we need to resolve. The other issues that I think we must look at is how to use competition policy and laws as a transformation instrument to ensure that out of these measures and acquisitions, global value chains are open to small and medium enterprises. It is our hope that this gathering will enrich our policy making to produce outcomes that will advance our development and thereby improving our partnerships and the lives of all the people in the member countries, that of Brics. At this stage, we would want to, of course, enjoy your stay in the Republic, but most importantly in KwaZulu-Natal, and even especially and specifically here in the city of Durban. And as MSC Mabuyakhulu says, enjoy all the beauty of this province that it will provide during your stay in our province. Right from reading about the Drakensberg Mountains in the west of this province, down to the warmth of the beaches of eThekwini, of this city, the beautiful scenery of this city, but then also enjoy the north and nature, which is in abundance, including what MSC Mabuyakhulu was talking about. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to call on stage the man of the moment who will deliver the keynote address. And this is a former trade unionist who knows how to operate as an underdog, but who has since risen across that wall that divides the employer and the employees, and has therefore been able to be exposed on both sides of the coin, and has risen to Minister of Economic Development, who is now presiding over the economy of our country, busy trying to craft policies, craft strategies that will improve our economy, both here at home, but also in the context of Brics, among others, but in the context of the world economy itself. And this is Comrade Ibrahim Patel, and it is now my honor to call him on stage. Thank you very much.
Premier Senzo Mchunu of the host province of KwaZulu-Natal, Vice Minister Lu Junchen, Vice Chairperson Lu Xiaobia, Director General Sheng Ming, and the delegation from the People's Republic of China, Mr. Igor Artemiev, Head of the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service, and the delegation from the Russian Federation, Mr. S.L. Bunker, Member of the Competition Commission, and the delegation from the Republic of India, Commissioner Paulo Burnia da Silveira from the Administrative Council of Economic Defense, and the delegation from the Federal Republic of Brazil, Deputy Minister Madala Masuku from the Republic of South Africa, ex-Chief Justice Sandile Ngobo of the Republic of South Africa, Judge President Dennis Davis of the Competition Appeal Court, Chairperson Norman Manoyam of the Competition Tribunal, Commissioner Tembinkosi Bonakele of the Competition Commission, and my co-host today, MEC Mike Mabuyakulu of the province of KwaZulu-Natal, Executive Mayor James Ngumalo of the city of eThekwini, Chairperson Matulari Coleman of the Portfolio Committee of Economic Development of the National Assembly and Members of Parliament, Professor Joseph Stiglitz, and the number of eminent academics and thought leaders here today, distinguished ladies, gentlemen, and friends from BRIC nations, from the rest of the African continent, from developed economies, and from multilateral agencies. It is my pleasure to officially open the first BRICS conference to be held on the African continent. The first BRICS competition conference that brings together practitioners and policymakers from 5 nations and our invited guests from other parts of the world to join us in 2 days of discussion and reflection on competition policy. We live in a time of economic ferment and change. Across the world, old certainties are being challenged, new realities are emerging. The features that we associate today with globalization are reshaping our economies, our societies, and our geopolitics in profound but uneven ways. On the one hand, the advances in information and communication technologies and the increased investment within and trade between nations have helped to lift many millions of people out of poverty, have connected the world in ways that is unprecedented in human history, has stimulated massive innovation in new products and processes, and has seen the rise of economic power of the fast-growing developing countries, together with a greater political influence they yield in global affairs. On the other hand, globalization has been associated with rising income inequalities within and between nations. Employment gains have not kept up with the growing number of young people entering labor markets. And for many hundreds of millions of fellow citizens across the world, the daily grind of poverty and vulnerability is their experience of the 21st century. This is, however, a period when changes are taking place in the old geopolitical model of much of the past 2 centuries that was driven by colonialism and its aftermath, that shaped the world in the image of dominant colonial powers. My own continent, Africa, has been affected particularly painfully by that history, but so too has China, India, and Brazil, and much of the developing world. Yet history is not immutable. Our legacy need not be our destiny. This idea that we need to take responsibility to shape our future is at the core of Brics, an association, a network of 5 countries who want to ensure that patterns of insubordination, however subtly maintained, are indeed changed, that all nations are able to pursue their interests in conditions of freedom and equality. Brics arose in the middle of the 2008 global financial crisis, a crisis which spread from the financial markets of New York to the real economies of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Europe, through the transmission belts of trade, of investment, and of growth, all of which came under strain or contracted in the wake of the financial crisis. Brics represents the collective efforts, therefore, of 5 countries to navigate their way in these new conditions, to develop ideas and share resources that charts a path of progress appropriate to developing country realities. In the language of this conference, Brics is bringing competition in the market of development ideas, challenging the Washington consensus on policy prescripts, fresh ideas for new times. Brics brings together countries with a joint GDP of $35 trillion in purchasing power parity, or 31% of global GDP. The 5 countries have 42% of the world's population and occupy about a quarter of the planet's land. The world bequeathed to us by globalization is now a world with greater volatility and insecurity. But let me say also, it is a world of enormous opportunity, created by the larger markets for goods and ideas that we have now, 15 years into the new century. Today's conference is the 4th meeting of the competition policymakers and regulators from Brics countries. It is part of a deeper exchange of experience between Brics countries. It incorporates this wider agenda of work, incorporates meetings on matters as diverse as industrialization, higher education, agriculture, e-commerce, environmental issues, illicit traffic in narcotics, base erosion and profit shifting, among many others. New joint institutions and fora have been developed. They include meetings of ministers of state and meetings of central bank governors. A Brics think tank council and an academic forum, as well as a Brics business council and Brics labor forum are now in place. The governments of Brics have also set up a new development bank to fund infrastructure and industrialization projects with an initial share capital of $50 billion. We've established a $100 billion contingency reserve arrangement to provide support to members who are subject to speculative investment attacks. Competition, dear delegates, is a powerful and energizing force in human affairs, helping societies to stretch further and dig deeper in how the resource of ideas and industrial organization is applied to the real problems of society. It is an important source of innovation, bringing new products and new ways of doing things, of rendering new services to consumers. Just look at how significantly our communication space is reshaped every year by the fierce competition between makers of mobile phones or computers, between the suppliers of software and apps, between providers of networks and ICT infrastructure. Competition combined with technological innovation has helped to bring down costs so that more people could have access to the goods and services of the 21st century. But it also contributes to making more accessible the basic food, shelter, and clothing that humans have needed through the eons of our existence. Competition policy is concerned with protecting and promoting the competitive process. And I dare say not the cynic's definition of competition policy as a system designed to generate billable hours or industrial policy for the legal fraternity. While I believe in the considerable benefits of competition, it is necessary to raise a caveat. Competition on its own cannot address all the challenges of our societies. It is necessary that it be part of a broader suite of policies designed to address issues of building local industrial and business capabilities, of supporting technological innovation, of deepening skills, and promoting industrial and infrastructure investment. Industrial policy, therefore, in this context, has a particularly important role. Complementing these, there is clearly a role for public policies on incomes and decent works, policies, if you like, about social solidarity that have had at their center the need to combat poverty and reduce inequalities. How then does competition policy relate to these? I suggest in at least two ways. By coordination of competition with other economic and social policies towards commonly defined national goals. In other words, industrial, labor, and competition policies can't all go in different directions, in competing, in contradictory directions. But I suggest also by competition policy itself directly making its own, sometimes modest, sometimes significant contribution to each of these broader goals. Herein lies the rub. Competition is not an end to itself. It's an important, in some ways, an indispensable means to an end. When we deify competition and competitiveness, we may perhaps be able to increase the quantum of goods that a society produces, at least in the short term, but we will not necessarily improve the welfare of the society. The one does not flow inexorably from the other. There's no such iron law of progress, no trickle down automatically from the one to the other. There are relationships, complex relationships. And so, dear friends, I suggest that competition policy, to be truly effective, should not insulate itself from the wider policy challenges of our society. Many moons ago, a respected African leader told his followers, "Seek ye the political kingdom first, and all else will follow." And indeed, the political kingdom was sought and found, in a manner of speaking. And yet all else that is good did not necessarily follow. In the same way, I suggest that an admonition to simply ensure competition and competitiveness and all else will follow is inadequate as a response to society's challenges. Our economies need low prices, but they also need people with jobs and incomes to be able to realize those low prices. Having noted the danger of competition fundamentalism, I wish, however, to recognize the critical role that competition policy plays in our economies, why we need to protect and enhance competition, and how we can link it more actively with the outcome of policies that we desire. There are a number of elements of competition practice that we have found particularly relevant in our experience in South Africa. They are first, addressing abuse of market dominance by large players in an economy who use that market power to impose higher prices, engage in predatory practices to keep out competitors, or raise barriers to entry by abusing their entrenched positions and who basically do harm to the competition process. This could include preventing efficient new competitors from entering or significantly harming existing equally efficient competitors. Second, combating cartels, price fixing, and market segmentation, which are all examples of companies and entities colluding against the public interest, colluding to acquire unearned rents in the form of profit, turnover, or market share that is not the product of free and fair competition, but of collusion. And third, the evaluation of mergers between companies and acquisitions of one company by another, which deals classically with transactions that on the face of it may reduce competition in a market or may have negative outcomes for a dynamic economy. In dealing with these issues, we've been exploring the deeper connection between competition and public interest outcomes. Let me pause for a moment. Are the outcomes of competition processes not by definition good for society, good for public policy? Well, as in so many matters of policy, it depends. And it depends on where you are placed in a transactional market, sometimes whether you are even in the market. When one company acquires another, rationalizes its head office, its overheads, its staff, and its production facilities, and the results are greater efficiencies, increased returns to the owners of capital, but in this particular example, ever decreasing levels of employment, those so displaced may be skeptical about the narrative that improved competition and a reduction of costs and overhead staff will in the long run benefit society. If they are inclined to fill their evenings with musings from John Maynard Keynes, for which they should surely not be punished, they may point out that in the long run we're all dead. And what does a transaction like this do to wealth concentration and economic inequalities, the defining challenge of our times? And so policymakers need to find ways to balance these different interests and considerations. In societies with very high levels of poverty and unemployment, the weight given to employment outcomes will generally be higher than in societies with less unemployment and poverty. It's this dilemma, balancing issues, thinking through how to find the application of the public policy toolkit to get the desired outcome that lies at the heart of policy dilemma. The South African competition regime seeks to address some of these complexities through an innovation in our law, in which the competition authorities have the dual mandate to promote both competition, pro-competition outcomes, and identified public interest outcomes. It sometimes requires the wisdom of a Solomon to find the balance. But while it would be neater, easier, simpler to solely focus on narrow competition considerations, it would not adequately address our reality. So this is the challenge, to have an instrument that is not defined principally by its elegance and simplicity. And of course, there is value to simplicity, but to have a fit-for-purpose instrument. What is the purpose? How do you shape the instrument? The South African Competition Act, which was developed 5 years after the formal end of apartheid, sets a wide remit to competition policy, and I want to briefly share some of that with you. The preamble to our law recognizes that an efficient, competitive economic environment is one that balances the interests of workers, owners, and consumers, and is focused on development. Competition law is there to promote and maintain competition in South Africa, and the law then sets out clearly what public purposes it should be directed at, and it identifies 6 such purposes. The first is to promote the efficiency, adaptability, and development of the economy. This is the fairly standard competition test aimed at ensuring an economic machinery that helps to realize national development goals through the efficient use of resources to achieve outcomes, that introduces nimbleness in the responses of enterprises to external pressures or to opportunity. The second purpose is to provide consumers with competitive prices and product choices. It draws attention to outcomes, not just to the competition process, but also whether the results of that in the hands of a consumer means greater access to economic outcomes. The third purpose is to promote employment and advance the social and economic welfare of South Africans. This is a somewhat unusual formal objective, and while it may not be exceptional for this to be in a general purpose, our legislation takes this and some of the other public purposes further by making them explicit considerations by the competition authorities when reviewing applications for mergers and acquisitions. In other words, it's not an assumption that if we get the competition right, that automatically these public outcomes would be served. They have to be explicitly examined. And it has a deep resonance in a country with still significant challenges of unemployment. I should note too that our competition authorities have on occasion gone beyond dealing only with the level of employment and have pronounced on merger-specific changes to the quality of employment. The fourth purpose is to expand opportunities for South African participation in world markets and to recognize the role of foreign competition in South Africa. This is what one can call the globalization clause in our law, which recognizes the reality of global markets and crafts a balance between opening our markets to foreign competition and at the same time noting the importance of our participation in external markets. The fifth purpose is to ensure that small and medium-sized enterprises have an equitable opportunity to participate in the economy. This goes to economic opportunity, enabling smaller enterprises which may not have the economies of scale, but may have flexibility and adaptability to find space in an economy. It's an important policy objective for us. In an economy where historically high levels of concentration, together with discriminatory laws, have limited the spread of small businesses in the economy. Now, this clause can also be used as a means of addressing economic inequalities in the society. The final purpose in our own law is to promote a greater spread of ownership, in particular to increase the ownership stakes of historically disadvantaged persons. In short, this addresses the legacy of apartheid, which excluded black South Africans from most economic activities, except generally as low-paid labor. Delegates, dear friends, what these six purposes show is that a country's competition laws can and should respond to the challenges and realities of that country. Our challenges are somewhat different to those faced by the United States in the era of the large barons, whose abuse of market power gave rise to that country's antitrust laws. But I have no doubt that though there may be differences in detail, many of these issues and concerns also apply to other developing countries. This brings me to conclude that competition policies are not simply a standard off-the-shelf product to be taken from an advanced market and applied to a developing economy, where in the fullness of time, it will lead to the given developing country growing to be an advanced economy. Steroids to move you from where you are to where you want to be. Yes, we can and should learn from experiences elsewhere in the world. And yes, developed countries have a long history of grappling with competition issues, and we can learn from that. And no doubt, some of the homogenizing effects of globalization and the presence of multinational enterprises in local economies make the lessons from one country more relevant to another than would be the case for closed national economies. But that's not the same as a standard tool that can simply be unwrapped and applied. There is no competition gold standard that applies unchanged in all countries for all times. Policy emerges in specific contexts. Policy adapts to local circumstances. Policy evolves to meet new challenges. Policy innovation is both necessary and inevitable. And while there are national circumstances that vary, there are also many structural and other features of developing country economies that point to the opportunity to develop a greater body of work on competition policy. At the recent Brics summit held in Ufa in Russia, the heads of state of the 5 Brics countries issued a declaration that committed to continue joint efforts aimed at improving competition policy and enforcement. And in the declaration they noted, and I quote, "As important emerging markets and developing countries, BRICS are faced with many similar problems and challenges in terms of economic development and fair competition. It is of significance to strengthen the coordination and cooperation among BRICS competition agencies." Unquote. I want to urge you to place competition and development debates in the context of a globalized world that needs BRICS to lead and contribute to rethinking the rules in the international economy. From our vantage point, the question is clearly on what terms we integrate our economies in global markets. There are no easy or simple answers. In South Africa, there's a need for policy reflection on the role of multinational corporations in our jurisdiction. Of course, they bring much that's of benefit: innovation, access to other markets, capital. But we need to reflect how we manage our markets so that there's space for local companies to grow and become major players, not stunted by dominant global firms who enter local markets. Interestingly, given the success of Korea's globally competitive companies, Nam Ki Lee, then chairperson of the Korea Fair Trade Commission, in 2002 at the UNCTAD conference made the following remark, and I quote, "Developing countries cannot avoid concerns about the competitiveness of domestic businesses. In this context, it would not be well advised to suggest that developing countries adopt the same level of competition policy as developed countries, when their markets are not as mature and businesses not as competitive." Unquote. These are matters that we are grappling with, that with your experiences from the BRICS economies could shed light and help us to achieve our objectives. It includes the challenge of dealing with a species of monopsonies or oligopsonies that emerge with the growth of large retail chains that materially shift the power relations between smaller, more numerous agriculture and manufacturing suppliers and larger but fewer retailers who are able to rely on their market power and also access to alternative large global supply chains to capture economic surplus, not through efficiency or effective competition, but by the exercise of entrenched power, the asymmetry of power problem, and who may dictate onerous terms on local suppliers that not only reduce supplier company returns, but also their ability to reinvest in upgraded capability. In this way, it militates against industrial policy objectives and is an example, perhaps, of abuse of dominance. So this is an area we're grappling with, we're thinking through, we're trying to see what the experience elsewhere show us. We are also interested in your experience with excessive pricing, including the tests you apply to determine the existence of excessive pricing, the remedies that you've imposed, and how well have they worked. Quite a critical area. Firms will grow in size. There will be dominance. Competition policy won't be able in every instance to avoid dominance. The question then is, what is the impact of that dominance on society and on welfare? A question, are any of the BRICS competition authorities also price regulators? In anti-cartel actions, have penalties had a sufficient deterrent effect on cartels? Or are they simply a tax that is paid? Have prices dropped subsequently? Do your jurisdictions include criminalization of cartel action? And how well have these worked? How best can competition policy embrace the policy objective of reducing economic inequalities in a society? And that brings me to the conference today. The program captures many of these themes and the issues I've spoken about. So I warmly welcome the way in which the work of delegates will be structured over the next 2 days. You'll deal with general topics, the links between competition, economic development, and trade, the relationship between competition, inequality, and inclusive growth, in which we will have Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz as one of the discussants, the connection between competition, growth, and innovation. You will also have an opportunity to focus on key operational matters with significant policy underpinning, such as public interest issues in competition, abuse of dominance enforcement, and competition policy in socially sensitive markets. The conference will have working sessions covering greater cooperation between Brics academic institutions on competition policy and Brics competition authorities, and the adoption of a joint statement. We have an opportunity, therefore, to engage each other, share experiences, learn from each other, and above all, place development goals at the center of competition policy. It is also an opportunity to develop conceptual depth to a richer competition policy regime that takes greater account of the varied needs of development. I welcome, therefore, the program of Brics research and the expansion of contact between universities in the 5 Brics nations on competition matters. By tomorrow evening, the conference would have come to a close. It is my hope that by then we would have achieved at least 4 objectives. First, that the exchange of experiences will provide policymakers with fresh inspiration on how to adapt policy prescripts to the challenges of inclusive growth, more and better jobs, industrialization, and greater economic equity in our societies. In short, to refresh, to update, to energize the competition policy agenda. Second, that Brics regulators and jurists would have deepened their contact with each other and strengthened their working relationships beyond the biennial conferences on competition policy. It should be possible for us to pick up the phone or send emails on a regular basis as a dense network of people who deal with issues of competition in the developing world. Third, that the program of research and intellectual work that we can stimulate and nudge forward over the next 2 days will help to give conceptual strength to a developmentally driven, jobs-rich competition policy regime appropriate to our times and our needs. In other words, that we take not just our practice, not just our laws, but also the power of ideas to influence, to learn, to educate. And finally, the delegates would have enjoyed the pleasures and attractions of this great city, rich in culture, demographically diverse, located at the edge of the Indian Ocean, looking east to China, to India, and to Russia, and west to Brazil, with a warm ocean and a cuisine that draws from many cultures, but it is particularly famed for its curry and its spicy food. Enjoy it. Enjoy the conference. Enjoy South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Patel, and thank you to the other honorable officials for setting the tone for our conference and the conversations that will take place from now. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now break for tea. If we could please return to this room at 11:30 hours for the next plenary session. Members of the media, you may come up for a photo opportunity with our delegates.
yaa ki ñuy dimbale yaa ki ñuy xetale fal njëkk yaaram ma samba yaay ñuy dimbale sama maam fal njëkk yaaram Cerno Fuati i kakane i beti fal njëkk yaaram Njagandu